So former RBA player Isiah Thomas, the big one, not the little one, but the real Isiah Thomas, rolls up a LeBron James pack, smokes a LeBron James pack, roll him up in a backwood and puts him up in the air. But Isiah Thomas ethers LeBron James, terminates and exterminates LeBron James, states that LeBron James is too soft. He's not mentally tough enough to have played in the 80s, in the 70s, in the 90s. He's not cut from the cloth that Michael Jordan came from. LeBron James wouldn't have survived the Bad Boys Pistons. Isiah Thomas believes that LeBron James ain't built like that. He's a cupcake. He's a fruitcake. He wouldn't have been able to handle driving through the lane and being hit with the rock type people's elbow. LeBron James wouldn't have been able to handle driving through the lane and getting clotheslined like Kane or The Undertaker does. LeBron James would have flopped. LeDookie James, LeDumbest James, would cry. He would throw a temper tantrum. He would be falling all out. All you have to do is pluck LeBron James and he'll fall to the ground. LeBron James comes from the new cloth. See, that's why he wants to team up and pair up with his peers. LeBron James is in his soft girl era. As I told you guys, it's starting to be a trickle-down effect, a domino effect. More and more RBA players are seeing through the LeBron James glass, the overrated glass. If they would have played in today's time, or they would have been able to have the luxury of being on the teams that LeBron James had, and how LeBron James handpicked superstar teammates, they would have just as many rings, if not more. Isiah Thomas is a far better player than LeBron James. I would rather start my team with a point guard like Isiah Thomas over LeBron James. He could never be in the same realm and sit at the table with the Isiah Thomases of the world. See, Isiah Thomas and Michael Jordan may have had their differences, but game recognized game. At some point, you gotta put your ego, your pride to the side and speak the truth. And he knows that LeBron James ain't on Michael Jordan level. See, Isiah Thomas, when he would be on television, had to be politically correct. He had to compliment LeBron James to keep his job. He would say all the right things. I mean, who wouldn't? Because the RBA was cutting their checks. And LeBron James is handpicked to be the so-called chosen one. So they had to give LeBron James all this positive coverage and mention him with Michael Jordan, or say outlandish things such as LeBron is better than Michael Jordan. LeBron James shouldn't even be compared to an Isiah Thomas. If LeBron James should be compared to anyone with the name Thomas, it should be Thomas Bryant, or that 90s, early 2000s singer Carl Thomas, who's mostly famous for the song Emotional. Which is so ironic because LeBron James is emotional. But Isiah Thomas is right. LeBron James couldn't have played in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. He wouldn't have even been able to play in the 2000s had they not changed the rules. LeBron James is not even a better player than Kobe Bryant. The league despised Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant was the closest thing to Michael Jordan of the 2000s. Kobe Bryant comes from that same ilk, that same cloth. He was hard-nosed, competitive, played with that rage, that fire. He didn't quit and form super teams and cheat to win championships. But LeBron James has been given and handed everything to him on a silver platter. So he's never had to work hard for anything. Could you imagine if LeBron James had to go up against Dennis Rodman back in the 90s? LeBron is so mentally weak, he wouldn't have been able to play alongside Michael Jordan. He wouldn't have been able to play alongside Dennis Rodman because they would have got inside his psyche. They would have got inside his head and he would have quit. It wouldn't have been the other team and them guarding him that would have made him quit. It would have been his own teammates because they would have held his feet to the fire. They would have held him to a standard, told him the truth, and he wouldn't have been able to take it. If LeBron James can get locked down by a J.J. Barea, much shorter, get locked up by a Jason Terry, Kawhi Leonard, Malcolm Brogdon, Lance Stevenson. I mean, the list goes on and on. If LeBron James can get locked up by these guys, just imagine what Bill Laimbeer and all these guys would have did to him back in the 80s and 90s. He couldn't play against Larry Bird. Larry Bird would have told LeBron James, I'm going to score on you. And this is how I'm going to score on you. And I'm going to call you the B word in the process. And LeBron James wouldn't have been affected by him making the shot. He would have been so affected by him calling him the B word. That's how soft LeBron James is. That's how mentally weak he is. LeBron James has backup with Team USA. He has other superstars that he's playing alongside. Now he's feeling all bold, showing off over there in the Olympics. So they had to form the Avengers to beat these trash teams. LeBron James is barely winning in the finals in his career. So you think he would have been able to play back then? As I said before, they always say that Jerry West and players that came from Jerry West era, they played against plumbers, but they beat the plumbers. LeBron James era, they teamed up with the competition. Jordan defeated his competition. LeBron James teamed up with his. There's a difference. He couldn't have played with Isiah Thomas. LeBron James plays in a soft era. LeBron James has quit each team that he's been on. He wouldn't have been able to quit in the 80s like he's doing now, because he would have been exposed all over the media for team hopping. The media would have crucified LeBron James, and he would have been too mentally weak. He couldn't have played in Jordan era because it was all about Michael Jordan, so LeBron James wouldn't have been getting the favorable calls. He wouldn't have been getting all positive coverage in the media because all the coverage and the spotlight was on Michael Jordan. Things would have been much different. He wouldn't have been able to flop. See, LeBron James, he's drugged up on steroids allegedly. But if you take away the muscles, if you take away the steroids allegedly, you put him in a time machine and send him back to the 70s and 80s, he would literally average 3 points per game.